I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The undiplomatic way to say this is that the Chinese Communist Party lies. The miracle of these last 20 years is now greatly suspect because of false numbers being published monthly, annually, of the Chinese economy. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com is here with me, and a report from China. This is China Real-Time Report, written by Dennis McMahon in these last hours with his colleagues from the Wall Street Journal. Gordon, the presentation by Mr. McMahon from China depends upon revelations from the National Bureau of Statistics. In other words, there is a Chinese part of the Chinese apparatus is pointing to the fact that another part of the Chinese apparatus is lying spectacularly. This, of course, is a town, one particular town. China's a vast country. Henglan, a town in southern China's Guangdong province. Mr. McMahon, thanks to the National Bureau of Statistics, is pointing out that everything about this town's reporting is lies. Inflation beyond expectation. The motive, of course, is self-aggrandizement of the local officials. Why are they telling us this, Gordon? You've for some time had doubts about all the Chinese numbers. This endorses your suspicion.
Yeah, the National Bureau of Statistics, to its credit, has reported that this one municipality in Guangdong province has essentially quadrupled the output of its enterprises. In other words, these enterprises were producing, let's say, 1. They've been reporting 4 to Beijing. And what this does is it shows that the output numbers in China, gross domestic product, these numbers are grossly inflated. Now, it's not just enterprises faking their numbers, it's also the exports have been inflated for various reasons. And so what we've got is numbers that have come out of Beijing which have no correspondence to reality.
Let me give you some raw numbers here. An investigation by the state statistician, in other words, somebody in the apparatus investigated this one town. 73 out of the total of 229 firms, 49 firms reporting. In Guangdong province is where the manufacturers are. So this is not some outlying district. This is where the action is. Yeah, it's where it comes from us. This is our Christmas. Okay, 73 of the 249 firms in the data. They surveyed them. 38 were too small to be counted as firms. 19 no longer produce anything. This is not just inflating one company. This is lying that the companies exist or counting companies that are barely a back door. Now, Gordon, one town. Does the Chinese Communist Party have the irony enough to understand that we now doubt all their numbers because one town in the most critical province for exporting is lying, that there's no reason to believe anybody?
Well, we should, because they quadrupled the output. The real output was quadrupled as it was reported to Beijing, so that inflates the gross domestic product numbers that Beijing reports to the world.
For the whole state, though, it goes into this is a major part of their export number. Guangdong.
Yeah, well, this is their output number for industrial production. But we've also seen for exports that in Guangdong province, again, there have been fake invoicing for the purpose of getting export rebates and for other purposes. And essentially what we have are numbers that are much larger than the reality. And that means that China is not as big as we think that it is.
The Chinese Central Bank, an entity that has one of those dry acronyms, PBOC, otherwise known as the People's Bank of China, right? This is their Federal Reserve, Mr. Big, Blofeld, Spectre, all in one, all thrown in together. Totally non-transparent, right?
Yes.
The windows are painted black, and then they're boarded over, and then they're sealed up with concrete, okay? We don't see inside. They are being said out of Shanghai now. They're no longer putting money back into the systems on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Why? What does that mean to all of the people in China who've been borrowing money crazily these last 5 years?
Well, it's creating a little bit of panic because, as we've seen this month, banks have defaulted on their interbank obligations because there wasn't enough cash in the system. What the PBOC is trying to do is essentially an informal stress test to see how banks are able to deal with not enough cash in the system. This is interesting because we've had 2 central bank auctions fail. In other words, 2 central government auctions fail. In other words, essentially they were not able to, even the central government was not able to raise cash when it tried to sell its 273-day bills. This happened on Friday when the Ministry of Finance auction failed. It also happened on June 6th when an auction from the Agricultural Development Bank of China failed. This is really stunning, and it shows that the liquidity problems in China can herald some very, very catastrophic consequences in the Chinese economy.
Now, banking can be a topic that wears you out quickly because, after all, they're talking about money, and what is that? However, we all understand technology and we all understand smartphones. So this final item, Gordon, I want your translation for this. A company called Huawei, technologies company, is looking to compete with Apple for smartphones, also with other manufacturers around the world. But Samsung has got a really cool phone that everybody likes. I see it advertised everywhere in New York. Huawei is putting out what looks to be a combination smartphone and iPad all together. It's very attractive, and they're promoting it. Gordon, I remember Huawei, don't I? Isn't this a company that is entirely suspect of being part of the PLA spying mechanism? Aren't they sanctioned by the American Congress for double dealing and for dealing with Iran for black marketing?
Yes, and they're banned in several countries for very good reason. I mean, Huawei was started about 20 years ago by a retired colonel from the People's Liberation Army. And from nowhere, it has become one of the biggest technology providers on earth. And people say, well, this is a private company. Well, private company, it just can't be, because no company can grow that fast. Obviously, what's happened is the PLA, the Chinese military, has been behind this company, as well as the Chinese central government. It is supplying suspect telecom equipment around the world that is probably corrupting everybody's backbones and telecom backbones. And so essentially what we have here is the Chinese government now competing against Apple and Samsung. And you know this is not a fair fight, because Huawei gets cheap money and it gets a lot of free access in China.
I say politely, buy Huawei and connect immediately to China, no NSA in between. I'm John Batchelor with Gordon Chang of Forbes.com.